So you're going to get a little break from me. I know you're looking forward to it. Hopefully not so much so, because I'll be back at 2:30 until the evening as well. But right now, we're going to bring on the incredible Joe Coburn, who's had 28 years at BBC, presenter of Politics Live and Daily Politics. Give it up for our friend, Joe! Here she is.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Yeah, although everyone's going.
No,
you
we'll
need to get them back.
Come back in. Joe's here, everyone. Trust me, you don't want to miss this one.
You don't. I'm not Amal or George Clooney, but hey, I can hold the crowd. Let's just wait a moment for everybody to take their seats, and then we will roll with the next session. Hello, everyone. Delighted to be here. I'm Joe Coburn. Welcome to the Economics of AI, brought to you by Project Syndicate. We're live from the Impact 26 conference in Poznań, Poland. The 21st century, so far, has arguably seen Europe emerge as the sick man of geopolitics, left behind by a rising China and America's internet revolution. Few now predict Europe will end the century stronger than it started. A huge part of that puzzle is artificial intelligence. A set of technologies so powerful, they have the potential to dominate our economy, our security, even our democracy. Quite simply, Europe is in danger of falling even deeper behind. So what is to be done? How can Europe turn the tide? Over the next 2 sessions, we'll be exploring those questions in depth with some of the people helping to shape Europe's hopefully brighter destiny. We're going to be joined by Lukasz Kaczena, Government Envoy for Artificial Intelligence of the Czech Republic. Christina Kafara, Chair of the Eurostack Industry Foundation, Honorary Professor at University College London, and Co-Founder and Vice Chair of the Competition Research Policy Network at the Centre for Economic Policy Research. And André Lerzekrug-Petri, Chairman and Scientific Director of the Joint European Disruptive Initiative. Now, our first session today is the sovereign AI question. If it doesn't control the technology, is Europe no longer in charge of itself?
In a secret Ukrainian bunker, dozens of Ukrainian drone pilots are attacking Russian targets 24 hours a day across the country.
new battlefield is emerging in plain sight. Chinese private tech firms are tracking and selling intelligence on US military movements using AI and open source data.
Data centers in the UAE and Bahrain were damaged by drone strikes from the Middle East conflict. It marks the first time a major US tech company's data center has been disrupted by military action.
Is falling further and further behind in the digital economy. 80% of all digital technologies employed in the EU are imported, mainly from the US and China.
Time to welcome our esteemed panel to sort through and answer some of those questions posed. I'm delighted to welcome to the stage Lukas Kacena, Government Envoy for Artificial Intelligence of the Czech Republic. Hello to you. Christina Kafara, who is Chair of the Eurostack Initiative Foundation, Honorary Professor at University College London. Please do take a seat and come on. And André Leuzenkrieg-Petrie, the Chairman and Scientific Director of the Joint European Disruptive Initiative. Welcome to all of you, and if you're not actually here in Poznań, please don't worry, because you can join in the discussion by using the hashtag #PSEvents. Welcome to the three of you. Thank you for being here in Poznań. Christina, can I start with you? Yes, do hold the microphones quite close, and also all of the graphics will be on that monitor in front of you, whereas I'll be looking like the audience behind you. Christina, you have said that Europe risks becoming a digital colony. What did you mean exactly?
Let me start by saying Europe is a superpower in tech, and we need to start and learn to act like one. Today, we are a digital colony because, as your introductory movie essentially said, the vast majority of the infrastructure, the assets that we are essentially basing our economy on, that we are using, that we every day rely on, are not built by Europeans, owned by Europeans, controlled by Europeans. And this is dramatically worsening because our share is shrinking. So we are a digital colony and becoming progressively more of one unless we act very aggressively and very fast.
Andre, can you pick up on that point, that if Christina says on the one hand, Europe is a superpower, I mean it is, and the EU within it as a bloc should be very powerful, how have we got to the stage of being then just a digital colony?
First, hello everybody, and it's pretty challenging to be on a panel just after George and Amal Clooney. So I want to say it's great to be here. So great to be in Poland and in Poznań. To put it to one point, I think Europe has become, in the last 10, 20, 30 years, the continent of strategic surprise. We are surprised by everything. And it's very related to what Prime Minister Tusk and Daron said this morning. So tech and democracy is related. If you cannot anticipate what will come, if you cannot show your citizens a way forward, a North Star, then you end up reacting. We have been reacting to OpenAI. It's incredible, because who read the Transformer paper, the T of GPT? It was 2018, and suddenly in 2022 we realized We were surprised by Starlink, which is so critical for digital infrastructure. Just talk to our Ukrainian friends who are fighting so violently on the front line. Talk about where all our data, all the data that we are now capturing for this kind of session, where it's set. And we are surprised by the fact that now the largest cloud provider in Europe has 1% market share. So we have lost this capacity, to answer your question, Joe, to get a vision, to know where we want to go. And that might also explain why so many of our citizens are turning to the extremes, for bad reasons.
Right.
We need to give this North Star again.
Well, just before I come to you, Lucas, you looked a little sceptical there. Christina, do you agree with this element of we are always reacting, somehow surprised by
the diagnosis is right, to which I would add we have wasted a generation deluding ourselves that if we regulate big tech, we will prevail. That was a complete delusion that delivered nothing, a fact zero. The sum total of the European regulatory effort is zero.
Really?
We have failed to appreciate that what we needed to do is build. Now we are scrambling to catch up.
Right.
This is the reality.
Well, actually, yes, go on.
Yeah, you remember the session just after that is called the Brussels Defect. And it's, of course, alluding to this book, which was called The Brussels Effect.
Yeah, but don't go there just yet. We've got to save
Guess who read this book? It was very popular, and the author, which happens to be a friend, so I try to separate the two, but I think the book made the biggest negative impact because it kept us in the illusion. And Joe, you started saying we are a big market. No, we are not. That's what Letta and Draghi are saying. We are still 27 markets. And in tech or in digital, the risk is the same everywhere, but the upside is continental in the US and in China, and it's still national. So until we don't fix that, we can pour as much money as we want. We can have as many commissioners saying great things in Brussels. It's not going to change the dice.
Well, you've cued nicely into, we're going to hear from one of the EU commissioners. Lucas, I'd like you, sitting here patiently, to respond to this idea that is being set forward by the EU Commissioner for Tech Sovereignty, Henna Verkunnen. Let's just have a listen to her.
Technological sovereignty, that we doesn't mean with that we are planning to do everything by our own, somehow in isolation. It's not even realistic, and we see also that nobody can't be competitive alone. So for Europe, it's very important that we are building up our own capacity in these critical fields, but also that we have like-minded partners. And we have digital partnerships with several countries, and AI is one of the key topics also in these partnerships. Of course, USA has been always our most important partner when it comes to security and technology, economy.
She talks, Lucas, about the USA being the most important ally when it comes to the field of digital sovereignty. Is that part of the reason that Europe has been so slow? It has relied for a long time on the United States, after Iran, after Greenland. Now they don't seem so reliable, arguably. Has Europe been naive about the role of America?
Well, probably we have been naive, and I actually was not being naive when I met Christina and Andrei in the backstage, so I understood that it will be hard for me to jump in. I love their spirit. I actually agree with what they are saying, but let's bring it down to earth. The reason why we are so much lagging behind is that the politicians in Europe are actually, this is not the issue for them. I agree with you, Christina, that we are a digital colony and we must act, we must do something about it. But is it issue number 1 or number 2 or number 3 for the Prime Minister, for the ministers of digitalization? No, it's not. It's the energy prices, it's the war in Ukraine, it's the Iran crisis and many other stuff, and it's not definitely AI or us being digital colony. So when you saw Madam Vice President Verkunnen, well, she was saying many words that you can agree with, but actually are we as Europe doing enough? No, we are not. So that's what Christina is probably suggesting.
Christina?
So the Commissioner was reading the bullet points. So not as to upset or irritate our friends. You know, that narrative I don't care for. the issue really is not just, in inverted commas, security or resilience of continuity. The reason why I disagree that this is not a prime issue for government, the reason I think it should be top of the agenda is because what we are pushing is not some sort of lateral kind of mission. Digital is foundational to economic growth for Europe. The entire mission, what I represent, is about how do we secure Europe's economic future, growth, productivity growth. Because we know that what is besieging us at the moment is the fact that while the US is careering away in terms of their productivity growth, we are not just lagging behind, stagnating and sinking. And the whole reason for it is because we don't invest enough in tech. Tech is all-purpose technology that pervades every single sector of the economy and drives growth. If we don't do that, we can forget our economy in 20 years.
Right, I'm going to ask you how much is enough in just a moment. But in terms of a concept for this session of sovereign AI, how important is that in terms of Europe?
Well, of course that is very important because being sovereign doesn't mean that we work on autarky. I don't know if it's possible, at least in the coming years. So we will have to live with the American big tech, of course. But at the same time, we should be working hardly on becoming more sovereign. We see what was the result of the restrictions on chips exports to China. China even more started investing into the semiconductor industry. Have we done the same? No, because we are not threatened that much that we actually would be starting doing something. We are more discussing it.
The concept of sovereign AI, Andre, is it important to you?
Well, we obviously in this country, and it should be much more in whole Europe, the topic of defense is key. If you look at the beginning of the war in Iran, obviously the way it's going on, it's not very satisfactory to say the least, but at the beginning something very important happened. The US military used a new tool called Maven, which basically reduced from, I don't know the exact numbers, from 2,000 to 20 or 30, the number of people that plan 1,000 different missions on the first 1 or 2 days. This is reducing the time of acting in military. And now, again, in Ukraine, it's very clear that today the key strategic and success factor is speed. So just on this aspect, AI is existential for our societies to protect each other. Then the second thing is about prosperity. This country, I'm both French and German, Germany right now is experiencing a massive deindustrialization because of the high energy prices that was just alluded to. But prosperity will be linked to productivity increase. What is happening on the agentic revolution right now, nobody exactly knows how it's going to happen, but it's going to affect all of us. So if we want, again, to plan the future and not having Beijing or Washington, and that's my concept of sovereignty, not to be autarkic, but to have our own destiny, to tell our people that we decide our future, we need to be mastering the key elements of this AI supply chain. So that's sovereignty.
Yeah, well, let's put it into perspective. Are we sovereign in our defense? No. Do we know it? Yes. Are we doing enough? No. So, and the digital sovereignty is even in the second or third place then?
I don't know if you saw, but just a couple of days ago, there was a NATO exercise between Ukrainian forces and other NATO countries. And there were AI-powered drones being used, and it has been a complete disaster from the traditional armies. And the Russians, that we like it or not, have also learned. So if today we have what we call in military terms a shock, I'm not sure we are ready. We have our societies who is ready, but that's why AI, among other things, is key.
Right, but the problem is trade-offs. I mean, Christina, you talked about the amount of money being invested. Andre and Lucas have talked about defence. Are we ready? Well, mainly because politicians perhaps haven't explained the trade-offs to invest vast sums of money in AI, for example. You might have to take money away from somewhere else. So, for the moment, the EU's pledged 307 million euros to fund AI investment in energy, transport, defence, infrastructure, a whole load of stuff. Now, it's not an insignificant amount of money, but is it really the scale of what's needed?
So, multiple strands. The question of what is credible and feasible in terms of industrial sovereign AI is one that we need to pay much attention to, because there is at the moment a narrative out there that says we will resurrect Europe's fortune through sovereign industrial AI. Now, I want to touch on this because it does color much of the current debate, and the reality is that AI is cloud. It's not a magical kingdom that exists out there. It is purely cloud. So it is GPUs, it is software, hardware, and all that. So if we are a vassal, if we are a digital colony in cloud, we remain so in AI because we don't have the assets to power that AI revolution. So let's not be beating about the bush. This AI revolution, to the extent that it means agentic, in the vast majority of the situations, it means building on hyperscale infrastructure.
What's the money? Give a figure. What are we talking? Hundreds of billions?
Well, of course, you know, but there is a presumption that, yes, you need hundreds of billions. This is what everyone is pledging in the US. But there is also a mindset that we have as Europeans that somehow this stuff has got to come from above. We need the governments, we need the Commission to make these pledges. Where is the private sector? Europe has enormous pools of money. Where is it?
Well, where is it, Lucas? I mean, when you talk about the importance of sovereignty, as you will know, debate has been raging in my home country of Great Britain for many years about sovereignty, national sovereignty and EU membership or without EU membership. What is it in the Czech Republic?
Sorry, Anne,
well, in terms of how much does it feel it needs to control itself rather than giving up on national sovereignty in that
Well, of course, that on the national level of the country of the size like Czech Republic, which is like a medium-sized country, is completely different than in France or in Germany or in UK. And we are much more dependent, of course, on both the American big tech, but also on I don't know, Mistral and others. We've got a great AI ecosystem in Czechia. We've got great, excellent researchers, some excellent startups that are even building the platforms for the hyperscalers in Silicon Valley. But of course that we are dependent on the others. But at the same time, we are realizing that we, as a government, as a country, should be building our own stack in a way. I mean, working on our own models, building the AI infrastructure, taking part in the AI Gigafactory standard, etc., etc. So, but as I suggested, it's we are just at the beginning because when we were discussing if it's hundreds of billions of euro, but who is going to invest that? We agree that it should be the private sector, like in the US. We don't want to go the China way. So how to do it? That it's actually the industry investing into AI and how to motivate them, how to raise the level of adoption of AI in both the private and public sector. That's the question. And we are just at the beginning. And I've kept on saying that I love the discussions and events about AI, but the disadvantage of such events is that they are usually the same bubble of people, and the majority is living in a different world for us. I love this statistics from OpenAI. It's from, I think, either start of this year or last year. They were saying, okay, we've got 800 million subscriptions for using ChatGPT. Out of that, only 5% of people are actually paying for it. That's roughly 40 million. And out of that, only 5% of people, that's roughly 20 million, well, sorry, 8 million, less, never mind.
I can't do the maths for you there, Lucas.
Several million people are actually able to use all the features of ChatGPT. So it's several million people compared to hundreds of million people actually using AI in some way. So the public discussion is somewhere else than the reality is, and that's also part of the problem.
Andre?
You know, I'm happy, especially in this country, to talk about the 7 deadly sins, but I also want to have some positive notes. I talked about the strategic surprise. I talked about the fact that we are not strategic enough. The other one is the illusion. Yes, of course, more money is important than less money. One number, Mistral raised 2.8 billion, OpenAI raised 180 billion. So we're talking orders of magnitude. But what are we doing with the money we invested in CHIPS Act 1? 43 billion euro. Where did it go? Now we are talking about these 19 euro HPC AI factories. Great idea. But what is it going to be? It's going to be, ladies and gentlemen, your taxpayer money that will be used to buy NVIDIA GPUs. Are we not using that opportunity to create a semiconductor industry? So I think this strategic mindset, how do we use, and the positive notes is, especially in this country, robotics. I mean, we are entering this autonomy economy. Drones, robotaxis, think about aging economy. Robots is potentially an opportunity to recreate, like automotive, a pull on component semiconductors. AI is critical on that. So let's use it to rebuild our economy. So that's the opportunity for the Europeans, and it's still a race to be won.
And it is an opportunity. I've realised I've now read your hat, Make Europe Great Again, just in case you can't.
And it's green.
Out there. And it's green. Christina, you mentioned, I think, the energy that is needed to fuel AI. If we just have a look at this graph, and I'll show the audience, and have a look at the figures here in terms of imports and exports is in front of you as well. You can see that EU produced 43%, imported 57%. Can Europe realistically talk about AI sovereignty when they import that much energy?
Look, I mean, we have the diagnosis well established. We know that we lack energy which is rightly priced. We know that we don't have a single market which is deep enough. We know that we don't have a capital market union. We know the diagnosis. We are admiring the problem still. That's what we are doing day to day. My position and what I'm pushing is very much this idea that unless we move aggressively and a combination of the public and the private sector investing, making things, building, we cannot in our lifetime expect that these fundamental structural problems will be satisfactorily solved. There won't be, in my lifetime, a real single market or a capital markets union we can rely on. The issue is, how are we going to delude ourselves that with AI somehow we enter a different paradigm where our current shortcomings are somehow magic thinking eliminated? Our current shortcomings are there unless we do something now. And that has got to be a combination of, yes, the public sector can do some public procurement to get the flywheel turning. Yes. I don't expect them to do more because the public sector hasn't got the capacity and the vision to create a digital industry for Europe. The rest is the private sector. But our private sector is far too still inert, complacent, and unwilling to move.
Right, so how do you motivate them? I mean, you are nodding...
That's the key question.
Well, I'm hoping you may have some suggestions. I mean, I wonder if, when you said there needs to be a shock, Andre, has the shock of the Ukraine war, has the shock of broadly shutting the Strait of Hormuz, are those big enough shocks, Lucas, to focus the public's mind and European capital's minds? No?
I'm afraid not.
Oh.
So
it should have.
No. So how do you motivate? I think the key driver for this needs to be demand. There needs to be an awareness that Europe is sinking. We are a mega power, but we are sinking in terms of economic future. So this is what Mario Draghi says. He says in 20 years, we will not have the current economic model sustainable. Our welfare, our pension, our school, our hospitals will not be viable. We are too complacent. I understand that when we have a long-term perspective like that, people don't think about it. What is disappointing to me is that European captains of industry are still not really seeing this as a European foundational grave situation.
Okay.
They keep buying Microsoft, buying AWS, buying anything else rather than build European.
Lucas?
Yeah, well, then we usually end up in nihilism. So, and I agree. But what we are trying to do in Czech Republic, and what's my role actually, is to do several things. One is the radical change of the education system. That's going to take years, but we have to start somewhere. Second, become one of the leaders in adoption of AI in the public sector. That's one thing that we can do, and we can actually motivate the private sector. If they see that it's possible to use AI at the ministry, well, they should do it themselves as well. And the third thing is, that's a huge priority for us, is of course the AI in healthcare. So again, that's something that we can do as a government, and I agree with you that actually the government cannot do that much. And one more thing that we can do is to work on the regulation of AI that's...
Stay out of the way.
Well, I want you to look at these pictures, Andre. I want everyone to look at them because you mentioned success stories. There should be more of them. We're looking at a huge ASML industrial plant in the Netherlands, which is the only company in the world which makes EUV machines essential for the production of leading-edge semiconductors. Why is it the only? Why aren't there more stories like this?
Well, look, I mean, I could go into detail about ultraviolet technologies that allow to do these very, very precise, fine chips, 2 nanometers, 1.5 nanometers. But the important number, since we're all fact-driven, about ASML is that only 1% of its revenues comes from Europe. Again, because there is no demand. What did we do with Breton's and von der Leyen's CHIPS Act? Our money. What are we doing with the AI factory money? That's why I'm so convinced, and I think there's an opportunity for this country to be very big in robotics. You asked about, I'm like Lucas. Unfortunately, we had so many wake-up calls. 2022 should have been one, 2026 should have been one, OpenAI should have been one, and we didn't react. Why? Because number one, we lack this strategic thinking. And I'm going to be a little bit blunt, we need political leaders that have the technological background to understand and to make calculated bets. We are in a world of calculated bets. When Meta does the metaverse, it's a bet that didn't go well. When Microsoft invested in OpenAI, they made a bet that was 1,000 times successful. Elon Musk, that we like it or not, is doing calculated bets. Where are the calculated bets of Europe? It could be robotics, it could be many other things. So I think this is a very concrete path forward.
All right, well, let me ask the others. Do you like the idea of calculated bets?
I was thinking about something completely different, actually.
You weren't listening to Andre.
Well, actually, it was about the DeepSeek moment. It was really discussed in the AI ecosystem in Czechia. There was the moment when we realized, or actually the Czech AI experts, researchers realized that you don't need that much brute force computing power to actually come with something that's very innovative. I was thinking whether they have such technological leaders in the political leadership in China. I'm not expert on China, but I don't think so when I see those guys on TV. So I don't know how they do it, how they came up with the DeepSeek moment, but we are still in Europe waiting for such a DeepSeek moment.
But I think it's a super interesting example you give. DeepSeek, what is it about? Okay, they use a lot of inference technology from OpenAI. Some people say copied, some people say used, but still, it's reducing by 2 orders of magnitude the level of energy used in AI. You showed the energy dependency, very rightly so. That should have been a European moment. The fact to say we cannot compete with brute force of OpenAI, but reducing the level of energy needed is something which is deep entrenched in the European values. I will give you another example of a big bet that we should do. Edge computing. Right now you need sovereignty issues because of defense. People don't want to share their industrial data. You need low latency for robotaxis. Where are the next generation chips and AI models that could allow us to actually do the same result but with much less brute force? That should be bets where you don't need to be a PhD in AI, but where you need strategic thinking. Right now, what do I hear from a lot of leaders, public and private, is, oh, we need to have our own AWS, we need to have our own Starlink. This is a losing proposition, and the bets are relatively obvious that we should take. And the fact that we go back on the Green Deal, that could have been our way to go out of the dependency of fossil fuel, is, I think, an absolute disaster.
Christina?
But, you know, this conversation is about where is the ability to take these bets. Are we expecting our politicians to make bets? In what world? We know it doesn't happen. We know our politicians are hedging bets. Watch the Cloud and AI Act in Brussels being eviscerated by von der Leyen before it is actually issued at the end of the month. Because we live in a world in which our politicians are scared, are fearful, apologize for building Europe. This is the unacceptable position we're in. So I have absolutely no expectation, no hope, no idea that the politicians will ever do anything of any use. So the issue is, you remember the famous Ronald Reagan phrase, the worst 9 words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. So that I have no hope for. To me, the only question is the private sector going to actually see the tsunami coming?
Yes.
Because we are beyond the line on the horizon, and do something.
You've been very clear. I'm going to ask all of you an open question briefly, and perhaps to pivot to a positive. Reasons to be cheerful, if there are any, perhaps not from Christina's perspective when it comes to politicians. What would success look like for Europe in 1, 10, and 100 years from now? You can pick whichever of the metric you like. In a year, what would success look like, Lucas? You look terrified as I asked you that question. What would you think?
Well, when discussing AI, whoever is talking about what's going to happen in 2, 3, or 5 years' time is not legit. So, well, in 1 year time, I don't know. We have been very skeptical here. We have been trying the private sector to push to actually change things. So I don't know what can happen in 1 year time. We have to move on with the simple AI adoption. That's the start.
10 years then.
Look, the measure of success in a year or 3 years is the extent to which we are succeeding in moving a bigger share of the pie to Europeans.
Right.
And capturing the value, because this is all about value capture. We keep getting this boring example of the judge in The Hague whose internet has been turned down because he was whatever. We keep coming up with that example, which has bored me to death, because it isn't really the risk we're facing. The risk we're facing is that we as Europeans, we will shrink in terms of our ability to capture the value we generate. And so the measure of success is what proportion of the value we generate are we going to retain? Not just build little cute businesses on top, which is what everyone wants us to do. You use our infrastructure, build your cute little apps on top, and you'll be happy. We won't. That's not what we should be after. So, measure of success, will we see more European businesses capturing value?
Yeah, Lucas?
Can I repair my,
yes, you
my
can.
answer? I want in 1 year at least the change of mindset that we have been discussing here.
A change of mindset. And you think that will make a difference if we start adopting a more positive narrative?
Yeah, positive narrative, definitely, because when we start discussing AI in Europe, it usually starts with, well, what a threat it is and what we should do about it. So if we change this mindset, that's...
Well, I mean, I'm very positive because I know that the talent and the capabilities in Europe are amazing. You travel around Europe and you go from here to Stockholm to Copenhagen to Amsterdam to everywhere. The capabilities and the ecosystems are terrific. They're not gelling, they're not just sufficiently powered up, but the capabilities are there. So we cannot give up. Mark Carney in Davos says, oh, we're all middle powers, let's hold hands. I say, no, off with you, Canada. You go hold hands with Singapore. I'm not a middle power, I'm Europe. Okay? And so that's the mindset.
I'll risk to 10 years, and I'll try to connect with what Daron said this morning. I think it's about the future of the way we work as societies. We clearly see that we're a little bit at the end of the road of the way of engaging civil society. We don't really know what public-private partnership, I mean, look at the debate here. My hope and my expectation in 10 years is that, number one, the role of the government, on that one I slightly disagree. I think it's still key to hold the bets which are too risky for the private sector. I mean, you know, I'm running an agency which is modeled after DARPA. I mean, most of the big bets, think about autonomous driving, did not have a business case. ChatGPT did not have a business case when it was invented. Now, today, it's obvious. So I'm looking for governments that will, they all say we need to be more courageous on public procurement, but I have not seen a lot of ministers who said to their lower level employees, take the risk, take maybe a European provider, maybe not one of these big names, and if you have a problem with public procurement law, then I take the legal risk. I see a lot of ministers saying, oh, we need to be more risky, but then they don't take. So that's one thing. And the second thing is the companies need to understand that today the value is captured by those who are making these big bets. Autonomous driving, 70% of the value is the battery, the software system, the navigation system. So the automakers, if they still think metal is important, they are cooked. That's what's going on in Germany right now for most of them. So we need to have these big bets, and so shareholders need to be demanding that the big companies in Europe do profits like Google has been done last quarter, 40 billion EBITDA. I mean, it's unbelievable. So I think that is what could happen in Europe, and I believe our diversity could help us reinvent the way our democratic system works. I think Daron is very much on a strong point here.
Well, I have a suggestion for you, since we've pretty well run out of time. Maybe we reconvene in a year. Maybe 10 years is a little bit too far ahead, and we'll see where we are. It's all we have time for. Thank you, though, for a very fascinating discussion. Before we thank our guests formally, just to say, don't go anywhere, because in a few moments' time, we're going to start our next session called the Brussels Defect, which I think one of you mentioned. Has Europe become better at regulating tech than building it? Certainly touched on by our guests here. Thank you from me. Lee, you can leave your microphones here and exit that way. But first of all, a huge round of applause, please, for Lucas, Christina, and Andre.
Let's make Europe great again.
Thank you. Welcome back to our second panel on the economics of AI from Project Syndicate. We are live from Impact 26 in Poznań, Poland. Where has it all gone wrong for Europe? You heard a couple of suggestions there. The continent has world-class universities, serious engineering talent, and major industrial prowess. And yet, when it comes to AI, its contribution is not much better than negligible. Today, we're asking a very simple question. Why? Coming up to discuss that, we'll be joined by Elsa Sependa, Head of Public Policy for Europe at the GSMA, Manuel Muniz, the Rector of IE University, Sonia Muzikarova, Non-Resident Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council, and Corey Kreider, who is Executive Director of the Future of Tech Institute and Direct Tech and Society Programs at the Melior Foundation and Senior Fellow at Open Markets. But first, a quick recap of the last 250 years.
AI transition may be faster, bigger, and more disruptive than the Industrial Revolution.
I would love to compress what happened in 200 years of the Industrial Revolution into a 20-year period.
America is the country that started the AI race, and as President of the United States, I'm here today to declare that America is going to win it.
It's the Lunar New Year, and China's putting on a show. 4 rising humanoid robot startups demonstrating their advances.
If we do not work cooperatively, there will be less data available to process, there will be less capital, and that is not conducive to the prosperity of a sector which is currently leading the game.
It's time to welcome our next panel to the stage. Please give a round of applause to Elsa Sependa, Head of Public Policy for Europe at GSMA. Hello. Manuel Muñiz, Rector of IE University. Sonia Muzurikova, Non-Resident Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council. And Corey Kreider, Executive Director of the Future of Tech Institute and Direct Tech and Society Programs at the Melior Foundation and Senior Fellow at Open Markets. Remember, you don't have to be here in the auditorium or on the stage to join in the discussion. Get involved wherever you are using the hashtag #PSEvents. Welcome to all of you. You found your microphones. Well done. Just hold them close to you so everyone can hear. And all of the films and graphics will be on that screen so you don't have to turn your necks behind you. We are going to start with a graph, so please take a look at it because it shows us the percentages of global tech revenue by share in 2025. And as you can see, if you look at them, the US ahead, way ahead, on 58%, China on 11%, and Europe is in a pretty paltry 3rd place. Corey, how did we get there?
I would say the problem in particular is with AI, because the video is about AI, is that the engine of AI is cloud compute, and big tech controls it. They've locked down over 70% of the market. And if our European AI farms don't have fair access to compute, and if they don't have access to distribution, then we don't have a thriving future for AI, right? And the firms, big tech, use all kinds of unfair moves to lock down this market. You can't move in your phone these days without somebody popping up saying you want some AI with that. I was talking to an executive at a European AI firm just earlier this week who were going to conclude a deal with a major university. They let people control their data. It was, they don't extract it. It's a much better kind of service. Only for the university to discover it had signed a deal that locked them in with Microsoft, right? So that, and that kind of thing, that kind of unfair practice, I think, has really shut out European firms from the market. So.
Right. I mean, it's interesting, as you say, not only is it bigger to start with, but then they've been able to lock it down by using dubious practices. I mean, Elsa, how much of a difference broadly, if you step back from America's sort of 21st century growth and economic, you could say, stasis or plateau in Europe, how much of that comes down to tech? And particularly, will AI make it worse?
Well, thanks for the invitation, Joe, to be here today. It's a great privilege to be here.
You're welcome.
Beautiful Poznań. I think for me, with my background at GSMA Europe, where we represent mobile operators in Europe and around the globe, for me, it comes down to connectivity. And I think we should really be focusing on the role of connectivity in all of this. Simply put, we can't have tech, but AI in particular, without world-class networks on which it can be built. We can't develop and run large language model AI without high-capacity data centers, and they have to be connected to state-of-the-art networks. And mobile, in particular, is a key enabler of this. 84% of global broadband connections last year were over mobile networks, and so we should be prioritizing that connectivity in Europe, in my view. But I think in Europe, we've not been supporting enough these digital needs. And as a result, we've gone from being connectivity leaders globally in the 3G era to being behind in 5G, let alone heading into 6G. And I think in other regions, obviously we mentioned Asia and the US, we see much higher network capacity and greater speeds and reliability. And those are the regions that are managing to explore and monetize AI and tech.
How much of it, though, is self-fulfilling, Manuel? If you sort of take the description from Corey, once you've got a sort of cluster of expertise, once that's created, and perhaps then the money follows that, then the talent goes, and some of that is draining from Europe. Is that just going to continue in that vein?
Well, it's wonderful to be here, no, I don't think it's self-fulfilling. I mean, I think that this is a consequence of policies that you implement. It's a consequence of the business ecosystem that you build, and these things can be built in Europe as well. I think this is an enormously consequential debate. I know the past couple of sessions, and this session was also framed around the economics of AI, which is very significant, but it goes well beyond this. We had recently, by the way, it's an interesting anecdote that speaks to this. We hosted at my institution back in Spain the UN's AI scientific panel. So the UN has put together, it's a bit like the IPCC for climate, but they put together one for AI. And I had a long chat with one of the co-chairs, with Joshua Bengio, who's a big AI computer scientist, Turing Prize winner, about the implications of this technology. And I think this should be the backdrop to our conversation. So this is the defining technology of our era. So not just in terms of its current capabilities, which are extraordinarily advanced from a university perspective, by the way, I should tell you, they're now outperforming humans on a variety of functions, but they're getting better at a very fast pace. They're so good today that we're struggling to build the right benchmarks. So that's how good they're getting on a series of functions. There doesn't seem to be a cap to their capability. They're misbehaving, by the way, in many ways. So they're being dishonest. They're putting their own functioning and survival first. They're misleading their programmers. So this is very concerning. And they're about to progress at an even faster pace because they're going to be able to improve themselves. So I think, to your point, in Europe, this is a technological wave we cannot be left behind. This will have economic, security, sovereignty implications that would be immense.
Do you agree, Sonia? I mean, are the challenges caused by AI going to be radically different? Are they radically different to the previous waves of the digital revolution?
Yeah, thank you for having me, first of all. It's a real pleasure to be here. I think the fact that the Brussels effect arguably is not working very well for AI in particular, and it has been in the previous waves of, when Europe was trying to set the global standard for GDPR, for the Digital Act, and so on. And it's not working as Brussels sort of imagined it a couple of years ago when it was thinking about the AI Act. Is showing that this time is different. And I think two things are happening at the same time here. The first one is the attempt at the classical Brussels effect that is not working. The second one is that Brussels has framed this to a large extent as a values choice, saying we choose not to compete on these terms. We're the adults in the room. We're setting the guardrails for safety, for privacy, while others move maybe faster, but recklessly. And now what's going on is that Europe woke up and is trying to hack its way into a starting line of a race that's already halfway through. And we can discuss why this is the case, whether this is a, fear of missing out on the competitiveness promise, or whether this is because the security environment has changed so much and the U.S. is no longer a reliable ally while we are dependent on the U.S. for so many things.
Well, those things have definitely happened, haven't they? I mean, has that changed the dial, Corey, in terms of how Europe responds to the AI revolution?
Well, geostrategically, absolutely. I mean, I don't know if anybody followed this, but the judges of the International Criminal Court last year were completely shut out of their Microsoft computing because Donald Trump had a bad day, sanctioned the prosecutor and a couple of the judges, and within about a day, they found that they couldn't access their Microsoft services. So suddenly, you've got people across Europe not only asking, like, how do we construct our own AI future, but they're also saying, oh no, maybe we don't need to be spending so much of our tax money on these areas where there's potentially a rapid kill switch problem, where actually a very unreliable ally could totally lock us out of our services. I would challenge this idea respectfully that the problem with what we've got here is GDPR or the AI Act or whatever, because ultimately those things never really got off the ground. I mean, the problem with some of those things is actually if you pass a law and then you don't enforce a law, then you've got dinner party chat. That's a debate club. It's not actually enforcement. Whereas actually the guys who are leading the AI race are people who have been permitted for 15, 20 years to buy startup after startup after startup with no real functioning merger control, right? And actually, that's one of the things that put them in pole position in the first place. So arguably, if we'd had a bit more market policing up front, then we wouldn't be having to correct so radically now.
Right. I mean, Europe and European leaders haven't been unaware of these problems. They've definitely been thinking about them. In September 2024, Mario Draghi, known as the man who saved the euro, wrote a landmark report, which you're probably familiar with, on European competitiveness, which has been adopted by every EU member state. Let's just have a look at the chart, because it shows how many of his recommendations have actually been implemented and how many are still to be implemented. So you can see 10% implemented, double not implemented, and nearly 50% are in progress. Now, I had a quick look at the ones that have been implemented. Yes, they're broadly what you would expect. The not implemented ones, energy is pretty well zero. It's negligible. I could barely see it. Elsa, what's your response to that? What does it tell us?
Well, it's very topical for us, and I think, actually, to just draw on what Corey was saying, interesting example around the AI omnibus. I think it's, for anyone who hasn't followed it, there was the AI Act, and then immediately upon its adoption, it basically moved into this omnibus process to simplify rules that were not even yet in force. And it's quite easy from the outside to see this as a rather farcical situation, but actually from industry's perspective, it's very welcome. And I think we're seeing, Draghi and Letta, indications of these. I think the European Commission is actually being very brave in taking some quite public and arguably humiliating steps to immediately undo some of the work that has just been done. But I think it's what we need to do. It's what we need to do in AI. It's also what we need to do in the connectivity world, where we see an awful lot of outdated regulation, legislating 2-3 decades in the past, whereas we have opportunities now with the Digital Networks Act, for example, and EU merger guidelines, which you also mentioned, Corey, to try to untie some of the red tape that Europe has been so readily wrapping itself up in for so many years and enabling us to look to the future. I think just one final point on that around AI. I think it's interesting to consider, again, with connectivity as a background. In China, for example, huge amounts of investment had already been made in future-ready networks. And so when large language models exploded, China was ready to take the great leap forward, whereas with Europe, we have this habit of kind of waiting for the business case to be there before we invest. And as a result, we're behind the curve in that respect. And so finding ways to unlock this and putting us on the front foot rather than always on the back foot.
Manuel?
Yeah, just a comment on this. I worked very closely with Enrico Letta, who also did a report around the single market. And he's produced this compass and is trying to keep track of what measures are implemented. By the way, most of the measures he suggested require no treaty change, so they're really about political capital being invested in perfecting the single market in the energy space, telecommunications, in banking, and savings, and a couple of other areas. It's kind of interesting because most of the debates, I'm a professor of international relations, so your question on geopolitics, the issues around AI, they bring a very clear question to Europeans about what do we want to build together. And I think there are two paths for Europe across most of these issues. One is a path of fragmentation, of not producing a properly functioning single market, and there's so much evidence that the single market has to be perfected across goods and services. I mean, it's so clearly diagnosed now. The other path leads to integration and scale. And that is a path that would allow us to have a digital single market where startups could scale, where we could mobilize a lot of capital into innovation, where we could build maybe large European frontier models, for example, which in AI would be fundamental, that would allow Europeans to build a common foreign and security policy that would be serious. So really there's a broad debate here about the future of Europe. And if we want to be 27 dwarf states with little markets that are fractured, that need to negotiate trade deals with China and these huge giants, or if we want to integrate further. And I think you cannot disentangle the debate about our competitiveness in the AI space with the debate about the future of Europe and the single market. They're two sides of the same coin. I think, one final phrase, I think we will be judged, the next 5 years will determine the future of a European generation. And there will be decisions made in local elections, in national elections, in the European Council, in the Parliament, that will determine which one of these two paths we will choose. If we choose the wrong path, Europe will be the object of foreign policy. It will not be an actor in international politics and economics. I think it's a very defining moment for the kind of Europe that we build.
Well, this next clip actually is from Ursula von der Leyen and actually underlines very much what you have just been saying. Let's just have a listen.
The IMF estimates that the internal barriers within the single market are equivalent to a 45% tariff on goods and even a 100% tariff on services.
I mean, what do you make of that? I mean, it does sound, I should think, to many people when they think of the EU, these internal barriers are huge. Who would like to answer?
But just one line, and I let the colleagues come in. So Draghi published a very interesting piece in the FT last year. It was titled, "Forget the US." So we are obsessed about our trade negotiations with the US and the trade deal, and we're negotiating 5 percentage points up and down on tariffs. And yet we impose on ourselves these huge... So this is back to the point that I mentioned before. In a fracturing international trading landscape, the question is really about the single market. It is, if we were to do away with these inefficiencies, this would create huge potential for European companies.
So what's stopping us?
Well, just to jump on that and agree with that, I sometimes think a lot of the tech law gets used as a bit of a red herring here. I don't know, when I talk to startup associations about some parts of the omnibus, they're like, well, yeah, they will say, look, yes, we'd like some things simplified, but some of the rest of this looks just like a big tech menu, actually. But there are other huge problems, right? I don't know if, I hope none of you work for a Spanish bank, but for example, like, we see so much protectionist behavior from national institutions. I do everything I humanly can, I live in Spain, to keep as little money as possible as I can in my Spanish bank that I have to pay Spanish tax, as opposed to a challenger bank, right? We did open banking, and so now, I don't know if anybody's used Wise, Revolut, N26, some of these others, but they're much better services. And opening up that sector at least has helped other people build better services. But we haven't done that, I think, in things like social media, which has been a kind of investment dead zone for 15 years. And again, if we want an AI that looks different from Grok, where we saw in January 23,000 images, sexualized images of children were generated in 11 days. If we want an AI that respects our values, then we need to have an economic stack that we control, that people can build on top of. I think when you say what kind of European economy do we want, that's what we mean.
Well, and you were talking earlier about guardrails, Sonia. Is that the sort of thing that appeals to you too, in terms of the way AI is developed across Europe?
Well, I mean, in terms of how Europe is hoping to regulate AI and how it's approaching it, it's basically setting globally the highest bar that there is for this technology, right? And since AI is modular, the underlying economics of it makes sense that, okay, if you have a high bar in Europe, then you can roll out a European version in Europe, but you can roll out the lower bar regulation all across the world anywhere else. So basically, I'd say that the underlying economics of AI doesn't support of the Brussels effect, the rolling up of global standards worldwide. But maybe on the clip from Ursula von der Leyen, I think Europe is very much awake to the fact that we need to, fast track both removing friction in the markets, but also building the capability, the build out, the compute, all of that inside Europe. But in terms of the removal of the market friction, so what I'm talking about here is for example, the Europe INC, the 28th regime, which is saying let companies be born European at scale. So we have that live and well, but it's very slow. Savings and investment union, capital markets union, how much have we been talking about this? How much progress? It's a super slow burn agenda. So we just need to pick up the speed here. Same goes now, the competition law reform is being reopened as well. So you need to remove the friction from the single market, but at the same time, if you decide that you want to be a credible AI player, you also need to add fuel to the market. So that says AI gigafactories, the CHIPS Act, Invest AI, and similar initiatives. But here the problem is not so much the speed, but the scale, basically, that is not a sufficient enough financial firepower being thrown at the problem when you compare it vis-a-vis the US or China.
I mean, we all hear, and I'll come to you, Corey, because you're looking skeptical there, but we often hear that maxim: the US innovates, China replicates, and Europe regulates. Sorry, China replicates and Europe regulates. Is that fair? I mean, is broadly regulation just more of a hindrance than a help?
You're looking at me. Before I come to that, I just wanted to pick up on one point from that several people made about merger policy as well and the single market element. And again, to give you an example from my world, totally agree that scale is absolutely critical to developing top quality products, services, etc. It's, AI, telco, everything is extremely investment intense, and you need the scale behind you to deliver. And just to give an example, in the telco sector, we're incredibly still driven by national markets. And so we have over 100 mobile network operators in Europe at the moment, with an average of 5 million subscribers per operator. And you compare that to the US, where there's 110 million subscribers per operator, or in China, 450 million subscribers per operator. Now, I'm not advocating a world in which we have 2 or 3 MNOs in Europe, not at all. But I think there has to be some happy medium there where we can step again beyond the national limits and understand a need to scale up and allow our companies to compete.
Oh, sorry.
No, go, you go, Manuel, and then I'll come to Corey.
No, I have an answer. I think the beginnings of an answer to why is it taking so long if the diagnosis is so clear. So Europe is a very complicated structure with a lot of diversity within it. And when we speak of European integration, and these measures are European integration, right? The deepening of the single market. Basically, it's a very euphemistic way to saying giving up sovereignty. So European integration is giving up sovereignty. I worked in the Spanish government, and you feel these things, right? You agree on these things, and you're giving up decision-making capacity to Brussels. These things only happen when the costs of non-integration are very clear, right? So the equation needs to be very clear.
And is it not yet?
No. Now, so this is why I'm fairly optimistic, right, to what we're going to see in the next few years in a number of areas, because because of the changing geopolitical landscape and others, and because of the shifting technological landscape, the cost of non-integration across these domains is skyrocketing, and it's enormously evident. One of the test cases, by the way, will be defense. So security and defense will be a very big test case of this. It's one of the areas where we have seen the least integration, to a large extent because the Americans were very present in Europe, and they undid this dynamic of the cost of non-integration. But now that they're departing, we're going to see huge pressure building up for us to do things in an integrated fashion much better. So I'm actually fairly optimistic that the pressure cooker, sort of the pressure is increasing on us doing this better. Now, one final line on this, which is, of course, the counter to all of this will be domestic politics, and it will be nationalism and particularism within our politics, and these movements that we live with in Europe now, in some places they're very large, that are sending, in my mind, this extraordinarily misleading message. And by the way, they do it under this umbrella of the patriots. So they're conveying to Europeans that what's patriotic today, what will make you more sovereign, will be to operate under these 27 small jurisdictions and small I cannot think of a more misleading message to send to Europeans than to say to them, you're going to be more sovereign, you're going to be more autonomous in a world of giants by being Luxembourg or Portugal and trying to do all of these big things. So this is the bifurcation of the road for Europeans.
But it obviously has appealed to sections of the electorate in European capitals. Corey?
It has, but I think that the electorate are also incredibly suspicious, for example, of the power of these American companies, right? So, I mean, if you look at things like, I mean, are they talking about 6G? No, obviously not. Are they concerned about what happens to their kid and their mobile phone? Absolutely. That, I mean, it may be a knee-jerk policy solution in many ways, but a social media ban for under 16s polls over 80% in basically every European state. And going back to this kind of harmonization point, like, do we go apart or do we go together? I've kind of observed, because Brussels moves kind of sluggishly even when there is popular demand for some of this stuff to protect their citizens, when there is genuine organic outcry to protect them from big tech and to do something different in the market. But von der Leyen just made a speech yesterday about child safety where she was suddenly talking about maybe we do need to have like a kind of delayed entry for social views, etc. And, you know, ultimately that's maybe a Spanish cattle prod there, right? Like you've got all these member states trying to pass laws, and fragmentation we can all say is bad, but if Brussels is going to sit there and not respond to popular demand, then you can kind of see why the member states are going it. And then maybe that produces us, as you say, getting our act together. Because we've got lots of different perspectives here about how to get this done, but I think we can all clearly see we are in trouble, and there needs to be some unity of purpose about something sovereign here if we're going to go forward much more as equals.
Well, there does seem to be general agreement on that idea. It is just a better speed. Did you want to say something, Sonia?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring in sort of more of a big umbrella question back, because I'm not quite sure, looking at it from Brussels, from an EU perspective, what we're maximizing for. Like, are we hoping to be a credible AI power that competes vis-a-vis the US and China as Europe? Because if yes, then the necessary plumbing is not there. We keep on reverting to the minimum standard, and we're acting as a 27-member bloc in terms of policy. So there is a misalignment clearly there, right? If we're hoping to fix the EU competitiveness problem, that's also a bit of a different agenda than being a credible AI power player, and it requires different course of action when it comes to policy. So, for example, we can reap the benefits of AI for our competitiveness. We have a huge manufacturing base. We can reap the productivity benefits from that, and this can be direct. It still can be US hyperscalers. We don't need to build our sovereign AI in order to reap the productivity benefits from here. And then we can be maximizing for EU sovereignty, and we can also be maximizing for EU freedoms. So these are all different objectives. They are interconnected, but each requires a bit of a different calibration of policy.
Elsa?
Thank you, Joe. Yes, just a more technical reflection, I suppose, on one of those key elements, and a positive one. In regulation can be very helpful, and one of the ways in which I think Europe can do well, if it does these things right, is standardization. And we're thinking, in particular, in Brussels at the moment, around the Senelec rules, which, for anyone who doesn't know, are harmonized rules on data inputs. And they're to be released at the end of the year, and we hope that they will be. And the idea there is to standardize the data layer that underpins European AI and allow innovation to flow freely across all 27 member states and ending an era where growth stops at borders. It's a bit like in the early days of rail transport, where every railway track had a different gauge and you had to switch trains constantly, even within a country. These Senelec guidelines will be like the standard gauge for AI in Europe.
I like the analogy with the old railways. We're going to talk about China, and just picking up on your point, Sonia, about what is the AI revolution from a European perspective? What is it that we're trying to achieve? Because China's approach is not simply trying to compete model for model with the US, but moving quickly to adapt and apply existing technology across the economy. Let's just have a look and a listen to this clip.
This gathering in Beijing, hosted by internet giant Baidu, hundreds of people line up to get OpenClaw onto their laptops and phones. The Austrian-designed AI agent is all the rage in China. The open-source software, which can run anything on a computer for you without you. You can tell it to search the web, buy plane tickets, even direct other bots. Wang Xiaoyan is using it to build her one-man band of a business, referred to in China as a one-person company. Human employees need rest, but OpenClaw can run 24/7, she says.
The mania over raising a lobster is, in theory, exactly what the Chinese government wants. Last summer, Beijing unveiled a blueprint meant to heat up the economy by diffusing AI across 90% of industries and all society by 2030.
We don't have much time, but Corey, any lessons for Europe here?
I mean, first of all, kids, don't use OpenClaw. I just need to say that right now. There's absolutely massive security and privacy issues with OpenClaw. You might as well just let a hacker into your computer, just to put that out there at the beginning. There's a real issue with some of these agents, right? There's a great talk by Meredith Whittaker, the president of Signal, about this, which is that to make it work at the moment, you're giving the agent something like root access to your entire computer, which would kind of destroy, I think, a lot of what we've tried to do here in Europe to protect the privacy that we want and that we hold dear. That said, on the kind of question of differentiation, right? One of the things that the Chinese have had to do is to innovate from scarcity, right? Because some of the most advanced chips were kind of controlled, and they couldn't be released to them. And so they've had to try and do more with less. And I think there we can learn something, right? Which is, do we actually need to create the same kind of hyperscale bloatware, or can we do a more smaller, targeted AI model with some of our kind of industrial data that actually gives us something more competitively useful? Should we specialize? Because there are, it's not toe-to-toe and it's not like for like, right? But there are areas in the tech sector where we do make something that nobody else can. ASML makes something nobody else can. Zeiss, there may well be more economic edge for us in that kind of specialization rather than just trying to do yet another large language model.
A brief comment, final comment.
Just a very brief comment, and linking to the question before, what are we maximizing for? What should Europe's goals be around AI? I think this is an important reflection. So this technology will be so capable. It is headed in the direction of being so capable. In fact, the moment it can perform tasks that run for weeks or months or years, which is not that far away from today, and the moment it can enhance itself, and by the way, very importantly, the moment it integrates with the physical world and we move into a physical AI space, this technology will change everything from competitiveness, productivity, our security landscape. So, if we miss on this race, and by missing I mean if there are no European frontier models, if we're fully dependent on American or Chinese models, this will have immense implications. So I would caution against the idea that you can have today a discussion on competitiveness without having a discussion on having the underlying infrastructure for that. So the challenge is huge for Europe. We have a window of a number of years where we need to invest immense amounts of public and private money into building and regulating European models on which we can then build applications and all the rest. If we do not do this, we're going to be dependent on powers that have different sets of values and interests, and by the way, on ownership structures that are highly problematic for European consumers, companies, and for governments. So I think it's the same debate. It's really the same debate.
And on that salutary note, thank you to all of you, to Elsa, Manuel, to Cory and to Sonia. Please give them a round of applause. Thank you for a fascinating discussion. Do leave your microphones on the chairs. And thank you to Impact 26 Conference for hosting us. Bye-bye.